Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is a familiar headline. Namibian opposition leader says party will not recognize the vote. Namibia is going through what Mozambique has been going through since October. And they have been going through what we have been going through ourselves in Zimbabwe. Last year, in fact, for Zimbabwe, ever since our independence in 1980, we have never had any elections which everybody could, in all honesty, say they were free, fair, and credible. I think this has become the curse of our part of the world. The failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. The ancient Greeks were right. Democracy, as defined as the government of the people, by the people, for the people, only works if the people are educated, knowledgeable, and diligent in holding those in public office to account. We have failed to do that. In the case of Zimbabwe, I think it will be fair to say that Zanu PF has all but usurped all the people's powers to hold them to account. Zanu PF has rigged elections for the last 44 years. If we look at the rural electorate, I think it is no exaggeration that they've been turned into nothing more than serfs, beholden to the Zanu PF dictatorship. Margaret Dongo, in a recent interview, said exactly that. Here is Margaret Dongo speaking on that issue.
They have wrong priorities, especially the current government. How can you go and build an airport which services a few people, and the majority are the elite and the so-called investors? Look at the rural. I made you come to interview me because I wanted you to have the experience of the roads that we are using. If we go today to our hospital there, you feel pity with that's a hospital in a rural area. If we go to our clinic, you feel pity. We have no piped water here. Do you know the reason why the rural people vote for Zanu PF? One, they're intimidated. Two, the policy is that the rural people should remain poor and subservient to the government. They should remain poor, because if they remain poor, they continue singing the song for their master. This is why these people have been impoverished. It's for a reason. Because at the moment, if you economically empower these people, they'll go out of hand. Zanu PF will never have control over them.
About the rural poor. We cannot say the same thing about the educated, especially those in the urban centers and those in the diaspora. If democracy demands that the people be educated, knowledgeable, and diligent in holding those in public office to account, then we have got good reason to think that Zimbabweans should be able to hold the opposition to account. After all, Zimbabweans have risked all to elect MDC-CCC leaders into power with the express purpose that they would implement the democratic reforms necessary to end Zanu PF's dictatorship, to end this meaningless cycle of disputed elections. So why is it that Zimbabweans have failed to hold the opposition to account? The opposition have been in power on the political stage for the last 24 years, including the 5 years in the 2008 to 2013 GNU. And yet, Zimbabwe, Zanu PF continues to blatantly rig the elections. Mnangagwa blatantly rigged 2023 elections. And right now, Zimbabweans, while we watch what is happening in Mozambique and now in Namibia, we know that we are only waiting for our turn. It will soon be our turn. We too will be going into 2028 elections with not even a token reform implemented, and will run the same gauntlet, another rigged election. It is madness, absolute madness. And yet, here we are. The leader of the opposition, Nelson Chamisa, right now he's on sabbatical. But we all know that he's coming back. In fact, he has already started sending his biblical quotations, which seems to be a prelude to his staging the comeback. What I think most people find really disappointing is that the opposition has proven beyond all reasonable doubt that they are corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless. And yet the people themselves have failed in their duty to hold them to account. Why is it 24 years after the MDC-CCC were on the political stage, they have not implemented even one token reform? And yet the people have said nothing. They've been participating in these flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. And still the people have said nothing. Chamisa has been known to lie. And here is a few instances where Chamisa has been lying.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifoiri. Plan ya Mwari haifoiri. ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
For there, that Triple C was going to win big because he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. And when he added the hashtag God is in it, it seems to have paralyzed people mentally. They can't think for themselves anymore. They believed him. Of course, he was lying. What is even more interesting is that while the people have got a democratic obligation to hold leaders to account, the people of Zimbabwe have repeatedly failed to hold the opposition to account for his repeated lies. In this particular case, the lie to con people to participate in a flawed electoral process, which he knew was flawed, which he knew that by participating you give Zanu PF legitimacy. But he did. Here is the one occasion where somebody held Chamisa to account.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana, mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana, mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election,
but
$15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Akasangana na Trump akatibvunza navakomana, mari yamuri kuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
That was the one occasion where somebody actually held Chamisa to account. Why Zimbabweans have repeatedly failed to hold Chamisa to account beggars belief. Chamisa right now is gearing to participate in the 2028 elections without one token reform implemented, and he will make the usual promises that he would win the elections. Hashtag God is in it. And the tragedy is many Zimbabweans will believe him. Why we keep repeating the same mistake over and over again? In the case of Zimbabwe, as much as some people don't want to admit it, the truth of the matter is SADC did help, did step in to help us end the Zanu PF dictatorship. In the 2008 to 2013 GNU, we failed to implement even one token reform. It wasn't SADC's fault. It was our fault. Whether we care to admit it or not, it's irrelevant. Fact still remains, we had the opportunity. And now we are sleepwalking into 2028 without one token reform implemented. And our friend, Nelson Chamisa, is already giving us the religious pill, hashtag God is in it, to put us to sleep. Chamisa must account and admit that he lied to the people. It is the people, us, it is our duty to hold him to account for that. To let him hide behind a biblical quotation is, to me, the height of insanity. Particularly when he is in the habit of making outrageous claims about God. Hashtag God is in it. He did say that God was in the 2023 elections, that Triple C would win big. That God was in it when he said that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. We know he was lying. God was not in it. He did the same thing in 2018. He told the people that MDC alliance has implemented substantial measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. He was lying. Are we failing to hold him to account because he's hiding behind a biblical verse? Because that seems to be the only rational reason why Zimbabweans have failed to hold Chamisa to account. Zimbabwe must avoid going into 2028 elections without reforms being implemented. If there are no reforms, people should not participate in those elections, only to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. That should be obvious. After 44 years of rigged elections, to believe Chamisa's idiotic lies about his party winning rigged elections is the most foolish thing that we can ever do. What is happening in other countries, this problem of disputed elections, we know it's a very common and familiar story in Zimbabwe. We can stop history repeating itself in 2028 by holding the opposition to account. People have risked lives and limbs and livelihoods these last 24 years to elect the opposition into power for the primary purpose that they will implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. They have not done so. We should hold them to account. We should not be fooled by the same idiots quoting biblical verses and claiming that God is in it and we fail in our duty to hold them to account. We know that God is in none of the opposition's harebrained schemes. Why should we be afraid to say so? Why have we hesitated to hold Chamisa to account? We must avoid 2028 becoming a repeat of what we have seen in other countries. It is within our power to do so, and we should do it. Thank you very much, those of you who were able to join me, and we hope we'll meet on this site again in the near future. Thank you very much, and have a good day.